Hey everyone, welcome to part 13 of the Basic Training Booster Pass Edition. Today we're going to cover everything you need to know to play Sydney Sprint on 150cc. While one of the more enjoyable Wave 2 courses for sure, as you could probably tell from the length of this video, it definitely has a ton of complicated strategies we need to learn. For this run we're going to be using our tried and true try-hard build. After the rocket boost we're going to do a right drift around the first turn, making sure to hold the drift for a little bit longer than you might think. We want to be facing almost directly forward before we start the next left drift, because this will buy us some time to build up a mini turbo and then do a right hop into left drift up the stairs. The next step is to do 2 mini turbo tricks off the 2 sets of stairs and a normal trick off the glider ramp. That second mini turbo trick is going to require a little bit of soft drifting to get down, so if you're having trouble there, just don't do that second mini turbo trick and instead drive straight up the stairs to do a normal trick. After that, we're on to the next difficult strategy. After we land, we're going to want to start a right drift as early as possible, because this turn is long enough that we can build up a super mini turbo and an ultra mini turbo, but the timing is tight, and it will require a little bit of wiggle drifting to do properly. What you should do after building up the first super mini turbo and starting the next right drift is wiggle drift to stay as close to the wall as possible, and only after having a super mini turbo charged up do you want to start holding left to widen your drift angle. This will happen right about when you get to the straightaway, and you want to keep holding left until you build up the Ultra Mini Turbo. After that, just do a left hop to release it. Drive forward a bit and then do a left hop into a wide right drift to grab the first coin under the ramps. The reason for that left hop is to help us charge a Mini Turbo while grabbing that coin. Okay, so all that stuff after the glider is really hard to learn how to do properly, because if you start the first set of drifts too early or at a bad angle, you'll run into the wall. And if you start the left hop into right drift at a bad time, then you'll either miss the coins or else run into the pole. So an alternative method for doing this section is to build up 2 super mini turbos around the long turn, and then just drive straight to grab all the coins. Now believe it or not, we've actually covered about 80% of the things that are likely to kill your run, but that last 20% might just make you want to pull your hair out. Once we've built up a super mini turbo around the left turn after the ramp section, we're going to follow it up with a mini turbo around the right turn and an ultra mini turbo while grabbing the coins around the final left turn of section 1. Again, stay as close to the walls as you can through all of this. Now just before lap 2, I do a right hop into left drift to build up a mini turbo and follow it up with 2 right hops into a left drift to build up another mini turbo to do a mini turbo trick off the ramp. But all that stuff is kind of obnoxious and doesn't save a ton of time, so feel free to just drift straight and build up a single mini turbo around the turn before the ramp if you don't want to deal with all that stuff. Now once you trick off that ramp, do a single left hop before tricking off the next ramp so that you can get better alignment around the turn. And make sure to be close to the left-hand side of the track, because if you're too far right, or if you're at a bad angle, you'll get a bit of airtime which will cost you about half a second. Trust me when I say that you really don't want to lose a run that way because of all the aggravation of section 1. Next up comes the first mushroom shortcut. Doing this optimally is a colossal pain in the ass, because what we need to do is right drift around this turn here, and then start our next left drift as early as possible, aiming to be close to the light post on the left, but not so close that we run into the wall after using our mushroom. We want to use that mushroom pretty much as soon as we get onto the grass, and then stay as close to the wall as we can so that by the time we build up a super mini turbo, we can use its momentum to hop back onto the track without hitting the grass and losing any speed. Then it's just a matter of doing a right hop into left drift around this first pathway to build up a super mini turbo, and a regular mini turbo around the next pathway. After that, we're going to start a left drift, trying to stay as close to the wall as we can without bonking into it. And then as soon as you can, start hanging a hard left so that you can take the turn tightly and build up an ultra mini turbo. I haven't really specifically mentioned coins yet, but you basically just are grabbing every coin that you see so that you can get your 10th coin just before the ramp section here. You'll see me do 2 right hops into a left drift to build up a mini turbo, but again, feel free to ignore that and just drive straight up the ramps. The ramps themselves are nothing to write home about, but the 11 or so seconds that follow the last ramp are a gigantic nightmare. The idea is to use your second mushroom to do a shortcut over the grass, build an ultra mini turbo, and do some glider vectoring to get back onto the track. Then you want to do a mini turbo trick off the ramp to jump over the railing and land on the track below. If you can make it through all this, then the rest of the run is pretty much free, but that's one of the biggest ifs on the planet, so let's talk a little bit about why. In order to build up that ultra mini turbo off the glider, you must make sure to get airtime off the grass shortcut. This is why when we landed from the last ramp, we did the right hop into left drift to build up a mini turbo, and then followed it up with 2 right hops before the shortcut. Now I admit it's kind of an obnoxious setup, but it's by far the most consistent way that I found to make sure that you actually get the airtime you need. Now I asked about this shortcut in Discord because it was giving me a huge headache trying to put this together, and according to Alberto, who you might recognize as one of the best time trialers in the world, it's pretty much random whether or not you get airtime. And even if you do get the airtime, you still might miss the Ultra Mini Turbo. So yeah, have fun. Now after that, the rail jump isn't really that bad as long as you got a good setup for it. There are basically 4 parts to this. The first is to approach the ramp from as shallow an angle as possible. The second is to trick off the ramp as far to the right as you can get, preferably with your back tires going off the corner. The third is to angle yourself in such a way that when you do the trick, you're aiming for this Yoshi here. And the fourth is to make sure that you have your joystick in a neutral position when you do the trick. It will take some practice, but it's fairly consistent, and I can get it about 80 to 90% of the time. So it's not the worst thing in the world, and certainly not going to be the main thing that kills your runs. Now obviously the easier way to do all this is to do the exact same ramp setup we did before, but instead of trying all the Ultra Mini Turbo into glider vectoring stuff, just trick off the glider ramp as quickly as you can, and then just before you get to the ramp, do a right hop for alignment, and build up a couple of mini turbos. After that, the rest of the track is pretty much free. We're going to go all the way through the ramp section again, but this time you want to make your way to the left-hand side of the ramp so that after your last trick, you can land and immediately start another left drift. This is basically a reverse version of lap 1, so we want to again build up a Super Mini Turbo and an Ultra Mini Turbo around this long left turn, or 2 Super Mini Turbos if you're finding the timing too tight. If you do decide to go for the Ultra Mini Turbo, then you might need to try doing a couple of right hops to realign yourself if you're facing too far to the left. Now I should point out that it is faster to build up a Mini Turbo and do some glider vectoring off the ramp here, but I literally spent like 15 hours time trialing this course, and this was the best pace I was ever on, so I just tricked off the glider ramp to be safe and not mess anything up. Now we're almost done. Once you land from the glider, do a right hop and trick off the top of the stairs, land in a wide right drift, do a Mini Turbo trick off the next set of stairs, and land in another right drift. After that, just finish up the run with a couple of Mini Turbos and use your last mushroom to cut the grass. Now you're supposed to build up another Mini Turbo before you finish the run, but for some reason, that just didn't work out for me here. Okay, so we're finally done with the strats. I won't spend too much time going over the world record because there's really just 2 main classes of difference between the world record and my own run. The first is that they do motion glider on every ramp in the track, and that includes the first glider where they don't even trick or build up a Mini Turbo. I messed around with this for a while, and I wasn't able to even get it to come close to saving time, so I don't really recommend that you go for this. The next major difference is that there are a lot of turns where they charge up higher levels of Mini Turbo than I do. You already saw one example in the first turn here, but they also do this on the turn just before the end of section 1, and on the second turn of section 3. I'll put a link to the current world record along with a link to my easier version of the run in the description just so that you can have some helpful resources no matter what your skill level is. Alright, let's talk about the track a bit more while checking out my current personal best. And by the way, if you haven't already, don't forget to click the like button if this video has been helpful to you so that it can spread to more people, since that's by far the best way to help out the channel. Okay, Sydney Sprint. I haven't finished time trialing all the courses yet, but I think it's pretty safe to say that this is the hardest track in the DLC, and I'm including Wave 1 in that analysis. In pretty much every track where Waluigi is the meta build, I've been able to pare my videos down to, here's how I personally play the track, here's a couple spots where you can make things easier on yourself, and the world record is basically a cleaner version of my run. For Sydney Sprint, there's not just a couple of spots where things are different. Pretty much every part of the track has at least 3 different ways to play it depending on what your skill level is, and there's basically not a single second of the run without something that can just kill you outright. And honestly, I love it. There's really only 2 complaints I have about the track. The first is that the trick timing on the first set of stairs is kind of awkward, which has caused me to lose way more runs than I care to admit. But I mean, that's just one more example in an encyclopedia of examples of stairs just being awful in this game. The other thing that's really annoying is the grass shortcut before the glider ramp in section 2. Without a good setup, you're basically just flipping a coin to see whether you get glued to the ground and lose your run. And even with a good setup, this happens frequently enough that I find myself praying to a higher power every time I approach it. It's incredibly frustrating to lose a run this way because, like I said before, the vast majority of my runs were lost in section 1. Not only are the stair tricks problematic, but that Super Mini Turbo into Ultra Mini Turbo strat into the ramp section is really precise, especially when you try and work in that counter hop drift stuff while grabbing coins. So making it to section 2 on good pace is a pretty rare event to say the least. And losing runs to something that's pretty much entirely out of my control is about as soul crushing as it gets. Thankfully though, once you make it past the second glider ramp, there's pretty much nothing else that you really need to worry about. I know I just spent like a minute and a half complaining about the stuff I don't like about the course, but make no mistake, these are really minor criticisms, and Sydney Sprint is probably one of my favorite tracks in the entire game, specifically because of its difficulty, and how it's tailored perfectly for the Waluigi tryhard build. Let's be clear, if I didn't absolutely love this course, I would not have spent nearly as much time on it as I did. And that's everything you need to know to play Sydney Sprint on 150cc. A really difficult but really fun course to play. I really hope that this video helped you out, and if it did, again, make sure to click the like button before you go, and also let me know down in the comments what kind of time you've been able to get for your personal best. Finally, I release a new tutorial every week, so subscribe and hit the notification bell if you want to stay up to date with all my latest content. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to do some basic training, and as always, I will see you in the next one.